My son looked me dead in the eye and dropped the bomb. Mum, I sold your house to pay for a vacation for me and Tiffany. You have 1 day to pack. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just smiled. He had no idea this house held a secret his papers could not touch. My knees crack. It is a dry sound, like an old branch snapping in the woods. Every morning, when the sun just starts to paint the slate roofs of Savannah in shades of orange, I get out of the bed I shared with Thomas for 37 years, and I hear that crack. It is a reminder that time does not forgive, but that I am still here, standing tall in my historic home on Jones Street. I have lived in this house for more than 3 decades, watching the wisteria vines embrace the brick walls, just as my memories have tangled themselves into every corner of this courtyard, where the garden fountain always sings the same slow song. This is where I raised Jason, my only son, my pride and joy, the boy who used to run barefoot down these cold stone hallways while I cooked Sunday roast, and the smell of hot cocoa drifted up to the old wooden beams that cost Thomas and me so much sweat to keep during those hard years, back when money was tight and debts kept us awake at night. Funny how a house remembers the love you put into it, even when the people you did it for seem to forget. Sometimes I sit in Thomas's worn leather armchair, the one that still smells a little like his tobacco, and the sandalwood cologne he wore on Sundays. I close my eyes to feel the house breathing with me, recognizing every floorboard that creaks under my feet, as if saying good morning in a language only the two of us understand. Then the silence breaks. The engine of a silver sedan, modern and loud, resonates against the narrow walls of the cobblestone street. It is Jason. He comes with Tiffany. She steps out of the car with her high heels, striking the ground with a rush that does not fit the slow rhythm of this neighborhood, with her hair perfectly dyed, and that smile that looks like a wax mask, one that never quite reaches her cold real estate agent eyes. They enter my house like conquerors, without asking permission, without kissing my cheek with any real warmth, leaving a trail of expensive perfume that chokes the natural scent of my jasmine and gardenias. "Mum, are you still messing with those plants?" Jason says, giving me a quick hug that feels like a business transaction, not noticing my hands are stained with soil because the garden is the only thing keeping me sane since his father passed 5 years ago. He looks at my hands and wrinkles his nose. Tiffany says nothing at first, but her eyes are like scanners, sweeping over the cracks in the ceiling, measuring the width of the mahogany dining table, calculating how many dollars these acres of history would fetch in a market full of outsiders looking for Southern charm, but without the old ladies who inhabit it. She sits on the kitchen chair, but she does it carefully, as if she fears the furniture in my house is not good enough for her white silk trousers, and pulls a disinfectant wipe from her bag to clean the table before setting down her latest model smartphone. That gesture hurt me. I felt a pinch in my chest, right below the sternum, a coldness that has nothing to do with the draft from the river. I prepared brewed coffee with a stick of cinnamon, just how we like it here. But Tiffany raised her hand as if I were offering her poison. She said she only drank almond milk, and that sugar was terrible for the skin at my age. "Mum, we have been thinking," Jason begins, and his voice has that technical tone, that financial consultant rhythm he uses with his important clients, not with the woman who bandaged his scraped knees and sold her few gold jewelry pieces to pay for his university in Atlanta. "This house is a monster." "Do you not get tired of climbing the stairs? The property tax went up again, and the electric bills to heat these high ceilings are insanity. It is money thrown in the trash that you could use to enjoy your final years more intelligently." I remained silent. I squeezed my warm clay mug between my numb fingers. His words felt like labels being stuck onto my skin, labels that read expired, obsolete, burden. A modern condo in Atlanta would be better for you, Susan, Tiffany intervened, using my first name without the miss, without the respect my age and my house demand, while she looked with disdain at my hand-woven lace curtains. They have an elevator, 24-hour security, and you would not have to worry about an old pipe bursting and flooding your living room. My feet tingle at the end of the day. It is a cold prickling, a sign that I have spent too much time standing, tending to my plants, sweeping the stone courtyard where the savannah sun beats down hard, trying to maintain the dignity of these walls that have seen my hopes born and die. I sat on the straw-bottomed chair in the kitchen, rubbing my swollen ankles, while the smell of reheated coffee filled the air. But that silence I love so much, the one that smells of old wood and peace, broke without warning. He had his own key, that wrought iron key which Thomas had made by the neighborhood blacksmith decades ago. So our son would always have a home to come back to, now turned in the lock with a dry noise that made my heart jump in my chest, reminding me that my privacy was ceasing to be mine. Jason entered first, with that fast pace of someone always late for an important meeting, and behind him, Tiffany, with her sharp eyes that do not greet, but register. They did not warn me they were coming. They did not do that anymore. "Mum, are you still using that gas stove?" Tiffany said, running a finger with an impeccable nail along the edge of my artisan tiles, looking at it as if it were a smudge of dirt, and not a piece of craftsmanship Thomas and I chose with so much love when we finished paying the first mortgage. Her eyes roamed the room, measuring the space, evaluating the wear on the clay floor, stopping in every corner as if she were already imagining modern, minimalist furniture in place of my heavy cedar dressers. I felt examined. I felt like an old object in a museum display case, something that gets in the way, but still has a price on the tag. "It is inefficient, Susan. The gas bill to heat this kitchen is absurd, and let us not even talk about the heating system for the whole house. It is a bottomless pit for money," she continued, talking about my expenses as if she were the one signing the checks, as if my life savings were loot slipping through her fingers because of my stubbornness. Jason did not say much at first, just nodded, but his eyes avoided mine, getting lost in the portraits on the wall, photos of him as a child, as if seeing the past caused him a physical discomfort he could not explain. He walked over to the pantry and started moving my canned goods, my spice jars, checking expiration dates with a thoroughness that was not affection, but a search for evidence. "We only worry about you, Mum," he said, and that phrase felt like a heavy blanket cutting off my air, a fake compassion dripping poison in every word. "A woman of your age, alone in this huge mansion, what would happen if you fell in the courtyard and nobody heard you? What would happen if you forgot to turn off the gas one night? I am 68 years old, not 90. I still drive my car to the library twice a week. I still make my own home remedies. And I still keep the accounting of my expenses in my leather notebook without missing a single penny. But they spoke to me as if I were no longer present, as if my mind were a fogged-up window that no longer let the light through. Tiffany walked over to my refrigerator, took a marker out of her purse, and with a coldness that left me mute, started putting labels on some of my containers. "This does not look good anymore, Susan. I am going to throw it out. We do not want you getting sick to your stomach from eating old leftovers," she said, tossing into the trash the stew I had prepared with such care the afternoon before. "They throw away my food like it is garbage, not realizing they are throwing away the last shreds of my patience along with it. My food, my effort, thrown out like trash, just because she decided it was not fit for me. That small gesture was a direct punch to the gut. My house, my sanctuary, was being invaded by labels and judgments I had not asked for. Then came the nightly calls. The phone would ring at 10 o'clock at night, just when I was reading my book, and Jason's voice felt tense. almost aggressive beneath that layer of concern he could no longer sustain. "Mum, have you thought about what we discussed regarding the reverse mortgage? It would be a way for you to have liquidity," he would say, and his questions started becoming an inventory of my most intimate possessions. "Where do you keep the original property deeds? Have you updated your will lately? Who is your power of attorney for medical decisions?" Questions that were not love, they were accounting. It was as if they were counting the days I had left, calculating the value of every brick, every piece of family jewelry, while I was still here, breathing, feeling the ache in my bones, but also the strength of my blood. I sat in the dark after hanging up, watching the moonlight filter through the beams of the patio. I touched the wood of my table, that wood Thomas polished with his own hands, and I felt the house asking me to defend it. They think I am weak because my hands tremble a little when holding the coffee cup. They think I am slow because I take my time walking down the cobblestone hallways. But what Jason did not know, what his greed did not allow him to see, was that I was not forgetting anything. I was watching. I was listening to the tone of their voices, the shine of ambition in Tiffany's eyes, and the cowardly silence of my son. And that night, while the chill of Savannah came off the river, I made a decision. I was not going to be the victim they needed me to be. I was going to be the owner of this house until the last of my breaths. Tomorrow would be another day, and I, silent and wounded, began to lock away my own documents. My fingernails are black. The Georgia soil is generous, but it stays caught in the cracks of the skin, reminding you that everything that grows requires sweat and patience, something the young people of today seem to have forgotten in their rush to have it all without sowing anything. It was an October afternoon, one of those where the air already starts to smell of autumn chill and burnt firewood, and I was there, kneeling on my foam pad, pruning the last roses of the season before the frost finished burning the petals. My knees reminded me every minute that I am no longer a young girl, but it was a sweet pain, the pain of caring for what is mine, of keeping alive the garden that Thomas and I designed with so many dreams and so few dollars in our pockets when we first moved into this Victorian lady. I heard the engine of his silver sedan. That sound, which used to bring me joy, now caused a hollow feeling in my stomach, a warning that the peace was about to be profaned by words I still could not quite imagine. Jason got out of the car. He came alone, without Tiffany, and his face did not wear the mask of concern from previous days, but something much harder, something final reflected in the way he slammed the car door shut. "Mum, we have to talk," he said, and he did not wait for me to get up, nor for me to shake the dust off my apron. He simply walked past me toward the entrance of the house, as if I were an employee being given an order, and not the woman who gave him life. I stood up with difficulty, feeling my back protest the sudden movement, and followed him inside, wiping my dirt-stained hands on an old rag, trying to calm the runaway beating of my heart. I entered my own living room, that room where I keep the cedar furniture and the portraits of my ancestors, and saw him there, standing in the middle of the room, looking at the ceiling as if he were calculating the value of the stonework, and not remembering the afternoons we spent playing on that same rug when he barely reached my waist. His words came out flat. They were rehearsed phrases, empty of any trace of humanity, as if he were reading a sales report in his Atlanta office and not destroying his own mother's world with a single breath. "I sold your house to pay for our vacation," he blurted out, and for a second I felt the floor of the living room open beneath my feet, forcing me to hold onto the back of his father's worn armchair to keep from hitting the floor. I ran out of air. My throat closed up, dry, as if I had swallowed a handful of ash from the fireplace. "Tiffany and I have planned a trip to the Maldives for our 10th anniversary. We deserve it after all the stress we have been through with work and debt, And the sale closes tomorrow, he continued, talking about a luxury resort and white sand beaches, while I looked at the walls that have protected me from the rain and fear for 37 years. He said the new owners wanted to move in on the weekend. He handed me a glossy brochure, one of those that smell like hospital and loneliness, with photos of elderly people smiling falsely in a common dining room he called a luxury residence. You have 1 day to pack your things. The transport will come tomorrow afternoon, and we already paid for the first month at the home. You will be safer there, Susan, without having to worry about anything, he added, using again that condescending tone one uses with someone who no longer has a voice or vote in their own existence. I looked him in the eye. I was looking for the boy who brought me wildflowers and told me I was the queen of this castle, but I only found a stranger, a calculator with cold eyes, who was willing to leave me homeless for a photo album on Instagram. My own son, for whom I worked double shifts at the fabric store when his father got sick, for whom I sold my family's land in the country so he would lack nothing in his education, was now treating me like a nuisance to be liquidated to the highest bidder. He thinks because I move slow, my mind does too. He is about to learn that rust does not mean broken. He believed I was going to cry. He believes my silence is submission, that my old age is synonymous with defeat, and that his finance degree makes him smarter than the woman who taught him to read and add. But Jason made a mistake. In his arrogance as a modern man, in his contempt for old things, he forgot to check the bottom of the safety deposit box I shared with Thomas, where the documents repose that he never bothered to read. I felt a new strength running through my numb fingers. It was not hate. It was the coldness of someone who knows justice has its own rhythm, and that I was not going to be the piece he moved on his board of debts and lies. "Oh, really?" I said, with a voice so soft he had to lean in to hear me, and for an instant I saw doubt cross his face, a shadow of uncertainty that gave me the confirmation I needed. "Then I suppose I will have to read that brochure well, to know where you are sending me, my son." He left shortly after, satisfied with his victory, leaving behind the smell of leather from his car and a silence that weighed more than death. I sat in Thomas's armchair for exactly 20 minutes, letting the rage cool until it became a sharp glass shard in my chest, while my hands stopped shaking, and my mind began to review every clause of the trust we signed in 2021. The Sanderson Trust. "The house is not in my name, Jason. The house belongs to the entity your father and I created to protect me from people exactly like you, and I am the only person in this world who has the legal power to sign a sale or open the door to a stranger. He cannot sell anything. He has lied, or he has forged my signature, or he has simply tried to scare me, so I sign my own doom without realizing it." I went to my computer, the one he thinks I only use to look at cooking recipes, and with steady fingers, I started looking for property records and dialing attorney Brenda's number, the toughest woman I know who is not afraid of men wearing expensive suits and empty hearts. He thinks the movers will come tomorrow. He thinks he will get me out of my mansion tomorrow. And that night, while the wind hit the windows and I reviewed copies of my deeds under the light of the desk lamp, I felt a peace I did not know. He has declared war on the person who loved him the most, and now, in the silence of my home, I was ready to defend it. Tomorrow he would understand that respect is not negotiable, and that this stubborn old woman still has claws beneath her apron. My hands would not stop shaking. I sat in Thomas's leather armchair for exactly 20 minutes, letting the shock pass over me like ice water, while the silence of the mansion felt heavier than ever, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath after hearing the eviction sentence my own son had just pronounced in this living room. My chest hurt. I felt a dull pressure, an iron knot right under my ribs, reminding me that my heart, although old, still had the capacity to break before the cruelty of the blood of my blood. Did my son really try to sell my home without my permission? Did he really stand here, in the place where I saw him take his first steps, to tell me to pack my belongings as if I were a tenant he is evicting without looking back? Jason's audacity was almost impressive, an arrogance woven with years of believing himself superior to the woman who taught him to walk, and who now, according to him, was nothing more than an obstacle on his path to success and appearance. I forced myself to breathe, slow, deep. Panic was not going to serve me now. I needed to understand what it was that Jason thought he had achieved. Why had he left here with that smile of insufficiency, so sure that I would surrender to his will without putting up resistance? I took out my computer. Jason thinks I do not know how to use technology, that my fingers only serve to leaf through old books in the library, or to prune the garden roses. But he does not know I have spent entire nights learning to navigate government portals and check bank accounts he thinks I can no longer understand. It took me time, almost 40 minutes of tired eyes and 3 phone calls to the county clerk's office and the notary, but finally I managed to get someone to give me the information I sought. Mrs. Sanderson, according to our records, the property on Jones Street is under a trust, the Sanderson Family Trust, established in 2021. You are the sole trustee. A bitter smile touched my lips in the gloom of the living room. Thomas and I had followed our lawyer's advice 3 years before he passed away, creating that legal figure to protect our house from any eventuality, making sure I had total control while I lived, and that Jason was only the beneficiary once I was no longer in this world. He could not sell the house without my signature, without my legal consent, which meant everything he had told me was an absolute deception, an elaborate lie to scare me and force me to sign my own ruin. Had he forged documents? Had he lied to an imaginary buyer? I needed proof, something more than my own intuition. So that night, I did something I had never dared to do. I called Robert, Jason's colleague, with whom I always had a relationship of respect and courtesy at company events. Mrs. Susan, what a surprise to hear from you, Robert said, but his voice had a note of caution, a hesitation that confirmed to me that my son's name was no longer pronounced with the same pride as before in the hallways of his office. I asked him for the truth. I begged him to be honest with me about Jason's recent behavior, about his finances, about anything that could explain why my son was acting like a stranger in his own house. There was a long silence, too long. Ma'am, Jason asked for a very large loan last month. He told the partners it was for a business investment, but there are rumors he is buried in debt up to his neck, and his position hangs by a thread because he has been distracted and failing his main goals. 6 figures. My stomach sank hearing the magnitude of the financial disaster my son was hiding under his expensive suits and luxury car. I hung up the phone, and my mind started racing faster than my tired legs. Jason was in serious trouble, and instead of coming to me, instead of being honest with his mother, he had decided the easiest solution was to steal my home, strip me of my security to save his own skin, and maintain the facade of a perfect life he could no longer afford. But why the story about the vacation? Why the Maldives? I opened the computer again and looked for Tiffany's Facebook profile, that world of mirrors where she publishes every detail of her ideal life. Her page was public, full of photos of luxury brands, handbags that cost more than my pension for a year, and motivational quotes about manifesting abundance while the ground crumbled beneath her feet. I slid the cursor back, scrolling through the last 6 months, and there was what I was looking for. Dozens of posts about her dream trip, photos of brochures from luxury resorts, countdowns to her 10th anniversary, feeding the envy of her followers with money they did not have and expected to get from the sale of my memories. They needed the money from my house, so Tiffany would not have to admit her life was a lie in front of her internet acquaintances. I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This was not just financial desperation. This was pure vanity, absolute contempt for my well-being in exchange for a couple of photos on a distant beach. They had decided that my house, my security, and my memories were worth less than their need to fake a wealth that no longer existed. That was when the plan started to form in my head. I was not going to run. I was not going to hide in any nursing home, while they toasted with cocktails paid for with the sweat of my brow and Thomas's inheritance. I would let them think they had won. I would play the role of the confused and unprotected old lady they thought I was, while I collected every piece of evidence necessary to prove their fraud. I was going to make sure they faced the consequences. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hoped never to have to use. The number for Attorney Brenda, the most feared lawyer in the state, and my husband's old law partner. "Brenda," I said when she answered, and my voice no longer trembled. "I need your help. My son just tried to steal my house." That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the kitchen, with a folder full of bank statements and screenshots, watching the moonlight bathe the flowers in the courtyard. They think I am old and no longer have the strength to fight. But they do not know that a mother who has been betrayed is the most dangerous force of nature. The truth was written in those numbers, and numbers do not lie. My eyes burned. It was a dry burn, as if the dust from the Georgia dirt roads had gotten under my eyelids. But the pain came from the blue light of my computer, the one Jason thinks only serves as a decoration on my wooden desk. The night was silent, broken only by the creaking of the ceiling beams and the rhythmic sound of my fingers hitting the keys, searching in that world of mirrors Tiffany calls social media. My back hurt. It was a dull weight in the vertebrae, the reminder of a whole lifetime carrying a son's hopes, who now viewed me as a bank account about to expire. I navigated through Tiffany's Facebook page, a place full of filtered photos that made her skin look like porcelain, and her life an eternal party of luxury brands, designer bags, and smiles that never reached her eyes. I saw the posts from the last few months, a chronicle of arrogance, full of phrases about manifesting abundance while the ground opened beneath her feet. Photos of exotic resort brochures, countdowns to her 10th anniversary in the Maldives, and videos of her showing off a life that, now I knew, was built on a swamp of debt. They were lies, pure lies. I felt a sudden cold in my hands. I remembered something, a small detail forgotten in a corner of my mother's memory. Jason's first credit card, the one I helped him apply for when he entered college in Atlanta, and on which I remained a co-signer. He never closed that account. He probably forgot it among his multiple debts. But since my name was still there, legally I still had online access to the statements. My fingers shook as I entered the password. I got in. And there, among charges for expensive restaurants and clothing stores we cannot afford, appeared the proof of the crime. $47,000. A direct payment to Tropical Dreams luxury resorts. The complete package for their anniversary in the Maldives, paid with money they do not have, with a credit line that was already at the limit. They had spent a fortune on a dream vacation, while their mortgage payments on their own house were 60 days late. They were drowning, sinking in a tide of interest and appearances, and they had decided that my historic home, the house of my life, was the life preserver they needed so as not to lose status in front of their stuck-up friends. I was short of breath. My throat was dry, as if I had swallowed red clay from the mountain. I got up from the chair and walked toward the hallway, touching the door frames Thomas painted with such care, feeling the physical humiliation of being treated like merchandise. I remembered when Tiffany, on her last visit, moved my photos of the Virgin and my parents to a bottom drawer because they made the living room look old and cluttered. That day, I said nothing. I swallowed my spit and lowered my head. But now I understood that small slight was only the rehearsal for the grand robbery they planned. They wanted to make me feel small. They wanted me to believe I was no longer good for anything. I sat on the bed and looked at the photo of Jason when he graduated, his face full of promise, before ambition and Tiffany's influence turned him into this stranger trying to evict his own mother. I thought about the double shifts I worked, the savings I sacrificed so he would have the best suit, the best car, the best education, only to receive betrayal dressed as help in return. It hurt. It hurt more than any illness. But in the midst of that pain, I felt my dignity standing up, firm as the walls of this house that refuses to fall. I was not going to allow my sacrifice to turn into Instagram photos for a woman who does not know the value of a drop of sweat. I took my phone and called attorney Brenda. Her voice, firm and straightforward, was the anchor I needed in the middle of the storm approaching. "Brenda, I have the numbers," I said, and my voice no longer sounded like that of a scared old woman, but like that of a woman who knows she has the truth in her hands. "They have massive debts. They have already paid for the trip with money that is not theirs, and they are about to lose their own house." "Good, Susan," she replied, and I could hear the sound of her papers moving, the machinery of justice starting to turn in my favor. "Say nothing. Act as if you are sad and confused. Let them keep believing you are easy prey while I prepare the defense for when those movers arrive at your door." That night I turned off the computer and stayed watching the darkness of the courtyard. The air smelled of approaching rain, of that wet earth that cleans everything after a long drought. They think the world belongs to them because they have credit cards and thousands of likes on the internet. But I have the deeds, I have the law, and I have a heart that, although wounded, no longer belongs to them. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in days, the shaking in my hands stopped. The storm was coming soon, but my house and I were ready to resist. Jason's silver sedan braked sharply behind the truck, blocking the way. Jason got out of the car like a hurricane, followed by Tiffany, whose eyes were bloodshot with hate upon seeing the moving truck remained empty. "Mom, what is this?" Jason shouted, approaching the gate with his face red with fury, completely ignoring the lawyer. "I told you this was for your own good. It is all paid for. The new owners arrive on the weekend. Why are you making things difficult?" Tiffany stood by his side, with her designer bag hung over her shoulder like a shield, and her shrill voice started to fill the street, attracting the gaze of neighbors starting to peek out from their balconies. "It is stubbornness, Susan. You can no longer take care of this place. You are going to fall and die alone. We are only trying to save you from yourself, and you pay us with lawyers." I stepped out of the shadow. I walked toward the threshold, feeling the sun on my face for the first time all afternoon, and looked my son in the eye, searching for the boy who used to ask me to read him stories, but I only found a man drowned in vanity and lies. My lips were dry, but my voice came out clear, with the strength of someone who has discovered that a mother's love is not a blank check for betrayal. "You are not saving me from anything, Jason," I said, and my voice sounded strange in my own ears, a voice that did not belong to the submissive old woman they thought they had tamed. "You are trying to save your own skin and the farce of a life Tiffany publishes on the internet." Jason's face went from red to white in a second. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, trying to recover his posture of the concerned son. "I am talking about the $47,000 for the Maldives you paid with money you do not have," I responded, while Brenda showed him from afar the printouts of the bank statements and the screenshots we had collected. "I am talking about the massive loan you asked for at your office lying about investments and the 60 days delay you have on your own mortgage while you try to leave your mother on the street to avoid admitting you are ruined." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the movers stood still, watching the scene with a mix of curiosity and pity. Tiffany tried to say something, to let out another one of her lies about safety and family love, but she stayed with her mouth open, unable to defend herself before the physical evidence of her own decadence. Jason looked at me with a hatred I never imagined seeing in a son's eyes. "You are spying on me. You are a paranoid old woman," he shouted, but his voice no longer had power. It was the desperate scream of someone caught red-handed. "I am protecting what is mine, Jason," I said with a calm that hurt me more than any scream. "What your father and I built, what I defended with my sweat, is not going to be the payment for your lies." Brenda took a step forward, closing the space between her and my son. "Leave right now, Mr. Sanderson, before I formally sue you for attempted fraud and patrimonial abuse against an elderly person. I have everything documented, and the restraining order is in process if you set foot on this sidewalk again without invitation." Jason and Tiffany got into the car, defeated but fuming with rage, while the moving van started up with a roar that seemed to clean the air of Jones Street. I watched them go, disappearing around the corner, and I felt a part of my heart go out permanently, like a candle running out of wax. I had won. My house was still mine, but as I closed the gate and slid the iron bolt, I felt the walls of the mansion were colder than ever. I had saved my home, but today, finally, I had lost my son. I sat in the courtyard, under the shade of the wisteria, listening to the water of the fountain and feeling the weight of my years. Victory did not taste like glory, it tasted like ash and loneliness, but as I touched the stone of my wall, I understood I preferred to be alone in my truth than accompanied in their lie. The legal battle was just beginning, but I had struck the first blow, and I did not plan to take a step back. If you discovered the sacrifice of your whole life was being used to finance the vanity and lies of the person you love most, would you have the strength to close the gate and choose your own dignity, even if that means standing alone? My hands do not shake so much anymore. It is progress, I suppose, a small victory of my nerves over the betrayal. But the void I feel in my stomach after kicking my own son out of my house is a black hole no cup of orange blossom tea can fill. I sat in the courtyard, under the shade of the wisteria, listening to the murmur of the fountain and feeling how the fresh savanna air caressed my face, trying to convince myself I had done the right thing by putting a bolt between Jason and me. But peace in this mansion has a very high price, one paid with the silence of empty rooms and the weight of knowing the boy I taught to speak now uses his words as weapons to try and erase me from my own existence. My back hurt. It was a dull, stabbing pain, rising from the base of the spine to the neck, reminding me that years have not only given me wisdom, but also a fragility. My enemies, because that is what they have become, Jason and Tiffany, are decided to exploit with a cruelty that takes my breath away. They arrived at 9 in the morning. Not them, but their messengers. A delivery man rang the gate bell and handed me a huge bouquet of red roses, my favourites, the ones Thomas used to buy me every anniversary at the market. It came with a card in Jason's handwriting, that slanted script I saw so many times on his school homework, saying, "Mum, sorry for everything. I just want you to be okay. Please let's talk." I put the flowers in water. They were beautiful, but their aroma made me dizzy, reminded me of funerals and broken promises, and I felt every petal was one of those poisoned candies attempting to soften my will before the next blow. Then came Tiffany's emails, long, erratic messages, where she painted herself as a victim of stress and despair, begging me to be a family again, and blaming attorney Brenda for brainwashing me and turning me against my own blood. "Susan, we are destroyed. I cannot sleep thinking you hate us. We only wanted you to be safe. Please agree to have a coffee with us. No lawyers. Just the three of us." one of her messages said, trying to isolate me from the only person really defending my rights. I did not respond. I followed Brenda's advice to document every attempt at contact, every emotional manipulation, saving those texts like someone saving evidence in a criminal file. Because deep down, I knew Jason's love was nothing more than a strategy to regain access to my assets. But the real blow came Sunday morning. I was in the garden, removing dry leaves from my hydrangeas, when I heard the gate open. Jason and Tiffany entered, but they did not come alone. They were accompanied by a woman of about 50, dressed in an impeccable tailored suit and a professional smile that did not reach her cold eyes. "Mum, please do not get mad," Jason said, with a soft, controlled voice, the voice of someone being watched by an important witness. "She is the doctor, Dr. Henshaw, a geriatric specialist who just comes to chat with you to see how you are, because we are very worried about your behavior these last few days." I felt a chill run down my entire spine. They had brought a doctor to declare me incompetent, to manufacture a diagnosis of dementia or paranoia that would allow them to legally take control of my mansion and my finances. "Mrs. Sanderson, a pleasure," the woman said, approaching me like one approaches a scared animal or a child who does not understand reason. "Your children have told me you have been having episodes of excessive suspicion, that you believe people want to rob you, and that you have isolated yourself from your social circle. Those are symptoms we should review calmly." I remained standing, with the garden trowel still in my hand, feeling the earth under my nails and indignation burning my throat. They were treating me like a madwoman in my own garden, in front of my own flowers, using medical terms to disguise an assault on my dignity. "I pay my bills on time, doctor," I said with a calm that cost me every ounce of my willpower. "I drive my own car, I coordinate the literacy program at the library, and my house is perfectly maintained. What my children call paranoia is simply my documented reaction to their attempt to sell my property without my signature." I saw the doctor's smile falter for a second. Jason intervened quickly, with his face reddened, trying to regain control of the narrative. "See, doctor, this is the type of accusation I told you about. She believes there is a conspiracy against her, that we, her only family, are criminals." Tiffany started to cry, perfectly rehearsed tears falling onto her designer bag. "It is the lawyer. She has driven her crazy. We just want her to be safe in a place with assistance. And she treats us as if we wanted to kill her," she shouted, seeking the specialist's sympathy. I took my phone out of my apron pocket. My fingers were steady as I searched for the audio file Brenda had taught me to record, and the photos of the bank statements proving Jason's debt and the payment for the Maldives. "Dr. Henshaw, before you issue a judgment on my mental health, I would like you to listen to this," I said, playing the recording of the afternoon Jason screamed at me that the house would be his anyway, and that I was a selfish old woman for not helping him with his debts. "And I would also like you to see why they need so urgently for me to be declared incapable, to cover a six-figure embezzlement and a vacation they already paid for with money they do not have." The silence that followed was sepulchral. The doctor looked at Jason and Tiffany, and then looked at the documents on my phone screen. Her professional expression changed from condescension to absolute discomfort. "I think I have seen enough for today," Dr. Henshaw said, gathering her briefcase with evident haste. "Mr. Sanderson, this does not appear to be a case of cognitive decline, but a very serious patrimonial dispute. Do not count on my testimony for any guardianship petition." Jason exploded. "Stubborn old woman, you are going to regret this. When you are alone and fall in this filthy courtyard, do not think we are coming to help you," he shouted, completely losing composure in front of his witness. Tiffany dragged him toward the car, insulting me under her breath, while the doctor left almost running from my property. I watched them go, and I felt my legs finally give way. I sat on the ground, on the cool dirt, and I cried. I did not cry out of fear, nor for the threat of guardianship, but for the pain of confirming my son was willing to lock me in an asylum just to not lose his privileges. It was a sugar trap, flowers in the morning and a civil death sentence in the afternoon. I went into the house and called Brenda. They tried, Brenda. They brought a doctor, I said, and my voice was like steel tempered in fire. But they couldn't. Tomorrow I want us to start the formal lawsuit for financial exploitation and ask for the definitive restraining order. I hung up the phone and looked at the bouquet of roses on the table. I took them and threw them in the trash, one by one, watching their red petals mix with food scraps and floor dust. I was not crazy. I was more awake than ever, and they were about to discover that a southern mother might have her heart broken, but her honor and her house can never be taken. The war was no longer just for the walls of the mansion. It was for my own freedom, and I did not plan to lose. My bones hurt today more than yesterday. It is a pain felt deep, right in the marrow, as if the chill of betrayal had stayed to live in my joints. After that afternoon, Jason brought that doctor to my own garden. I sat in the kitchen, back leaning against the hardwood chair, feeling the silence of the mansion like a heavy sheet covering my shoulders, reminding me that the sun, for whom I gave every drop of my energy, now only saw me as a legal obstacle that needed to be removed. I had a cup of coffee between my hands, but I did not drink it. I only let the heat warm my numb fingers while I looked at the pantry, where Tiffany still had some labels stuck with her shrill, cursive handwriting, marking what she considered suitable food for a woman of my age. I got up, and with a slow but firm movement, started ripping off those labels. They were small pieces of adhesive paper resisting letting go, leaving a trail of dirty glue on the glass of my jars, reminding me how they had tried to mark every corner of my life, as if it no longer belonged to me. I felt alone. It was a physical loneliness, the kind you notice when you set only one plate at the table, or when you hear the wind move a door and know no one is going to close it for you. Jason was right about something. He was my only son, and the void his absence left was a black abyss in the middle of my living room. But that afternoon, my literary society from Jones Street saved me from the shipwreck. We meet every Thursday at the library, a place smelling of old paper and floor wax, where for 12 years we have discussed everything from Southern classics to mystery novels that keep us awake at night. I had always been the most reserved, the one who listened more than she spoke, keeping my sorrows under my shawl so as not to bother the others with my family dramas. But that Thursday, something broke inside me. Martha, a retired nurse who has the sweetest eyes in Savannah, approached me while we served tea and put a hand on my arm, a hand feeling firm and full of an experience needing no words. "Susan, you are not here today," she told me, and her voice was the trigger that made the floodgates of my silence come crashing down. "You have your gaze lost on the river, and you have not said a word about this month's book. Tell us what is wrong, friend. That is what we are here for." And I told them everything. Every word came out like a long and painful sigh, from the attempted sale of the house to the doctor's visit, and the brochure for the nursing home Jason had left on the table, as if it were an invitation to a party. I spoke of the humiliation of being watched in my own kitchen, the fear of being declared incompetent, and the deep sadness of seeing my son turn into a stranger, moved by the greed of a woman who does not know what honor is. I expected judgment, expected them to tell me maybe I was too hard, or that family must forgive everything because it is blood of our blood. But what I received was a fortress of solidarity. "Oh, honey, my nephew tried the same thing with his mother-in-law," exclaimed Clara, adjusting her glasses with a fury that made the tea ripple in her cup. "Do not let them make you feel guilty, Susan. They use our love like a chain to drag us where it suits them. But you are not crazy, nor are you alone. Patty, who worked years in social services before retiring, approached with a notebook and started writing down names and numbers. Emotional manipulation is the first tool of abusers, Susan. They give you flowers, they cry to you, and then they threaten you with abandonment so you hand over control of your dollars. It is a script we know well, she said, explaining that what Jason was doing had a legal name: financial exploitation. In less than an hour, my friends turned into my army. Martha called her son-in-law, who is a security technician, and that same afternoon he went to my house to install cameras recording every corner of the gate and courtyard, so Jason can never again enter without a record of his aggression. Clara gave me practical advice on how to change locks and document every unexpected visit, reminding me that in law, what is not written or recorded does not exist. Patty took me Friday to my first support group meeting at the community centre, a circle of 12 people, men and women my age, who had gone through identical betrayals. I heard the story of a man named Robert, whose son told him he was selfish for not handing over his retirement savings. I heard Dorothy, whose daughter threatened to put her in a home where no one would visit if she did not sign over the deeds to her ranch. Their stories were mine, their scars were mine, and hearing them I felt a new strength, a steel column, starting to grow in my back, replacing the knot of pain that had kept me hunched for weeks. I was not crazy. I was not being paranoid. I was defending my life from an assault disguised as filial piety. When I returned home that night, I found one last email from Tiffany. It was short, cold, stripped now of any trace of the niceties of previous days. "Your silence speaks for itself, Susan," the message said. "We have tried to help you, but you have preferred that lawyer over your own family. Do not come crying when you are left alone and have no one to pass you a glass of water." I read the message without my hands shaking. I forwarded it to Attorney Brenda for her file, and then, with quiet satisfaction, pressed the delete button. I was not alone. I had my friends, I had my support group, I had my lawyer, and I had myself. Jason and Tiffany had tried to convince me they were all I had in this world, but they had been wrong. I closed the gate and slid the new bolt. I walked through my courtyard, seeing the lights of the cameras now watching over my safety, and felt the mansion breathing with me, more protected than ever. They think isolation will break me, but they do not know I have built a fortress with the stones they threw at me. And now, finally, I am ready to see them in court. My hands are still. They no longer tremble. They no longer search desperately for a rosary or the edge of a handkerchief to hide the fear provoked by my own son's gaze. I sat in the central courtyard of my mansion, back well supported on the stone bench that still holds the heat of the Savannah sun, listening to the fountain water fall with a peace I had not known since Thomas closed his eyes forever. Victory in court was not an explosion of joy. There were no shouts or loud celebrations, but rather a deep silence, a long exhalation that took months of humiliation off my chest, humiliation that was bending my shoulders as if I were carrying all the bricks of Jones Street. I feel the weight of my 68 years, but it is no longer the weight of a burden, but that of a root that has finally found firm ground, after its own blood tried to rip it out to sell it as second-hand firewood. My house breathes with me. Every room, every tile Tiffany despised with her real estate agent eyes seems to have recovered its natural shine, now that the adhesive labels and eviction threats have dissolved in judicial files. The punishment for Jason did not come from my shouts, because I never needed to shout to defend my truth, but came from the very machinery of ambition and lies he oiled with such care. The investigation by Linda Martinez, the adult protective services worker, was like a hurricane that left no stone unturned in the farce of a life my son had built in Atlanta. She reviewed every video from my cameras, every email where Tiffany treated me like a crazy woman, and every bank statement where Jason transferred money for his luxuries, while my electric bills piled up in the mailbox. Jason lost his job. He lost it all in one afternoon, when the partners at his financial firm understood that a man who tries to swindle his mother is not a consultant, but a risk no serious company can afford to carry on its payroll. He was fired without severance, without a letter of recommendation, and with the stigma of financial exploitation engraved in his file like a brand of fire that will pursue him in every job interview he tries to get in this country. Tiffany suffered the same fate, because in the world of real estate, reputation is everything, and the rumor that she had tried to force the sale of a historic mansion under an illegal trust ran through the offices of Savannah like water in a flood. Her license was investigated. Her brokerage asked for her resignation, and overnight, her social media, those places where she boasted an abundance that did not belong to her, went silent, deleting the photos of the Maldives they never got to step on. That trip they desired so much that one worth more than my memories and my safety became their final ruin. The resort did not return the $47,000 because last-minute cancellations do not have refunds, and that money, the money my son stole from our future, stayed floating in a bank account on a distant island, while they no longer had enough to pay the month's rent. It hurts me. It hurts in the depths of my womb, where I once carried him with hope. I received a letter from him a month ago. It was a handwritten letter, with handwriting denoting tiredness, and a bitterness that still sought me out to make me feel responsible for his fall. We are living in a cheap apartment, we have no friends, and Tiffany won't stop crying about what you did to us. It said, as if I were the one who signed the loans, as if I were the one who lied in court, as if protecting my life were a personal attack against their well-being. I did not respond. I burned the letter in the living room fireplace, watching his complaints turn into smoke and ash, understanding that forgiveness cannot exist where there is no repentance, but only resentment for having been caught. Brenda closed the definitive legal deal. Jason signed the waiver to any future inheritance. He accepted the restraining order and enrolled in a financial counseling program by order of the judge, while I updated my will so that the day I am no longer here, this mansion becomes the Susan Foundation. It will be a place for the grandmothers of Savannah to have lawyers who do not charge, to have cameras that watch over them, and so that never again does a son believe old age is a weakness that can be looted with impunity. I have come back to life. I hired some masons to fix the cracks Tiffany criticized so much. I put new tiles in the kitchen and stained the courtyard beams a walnut color, making the house smell of forest and new beginnings. My literary society now meets here every Thursday. We fill the dining room with sweet bread, brewed coffee, and laughter that has no fear of being interrupted by someone looking at us with contempt or impatience. Even David, the professor from the library, has started bringing flowers from his own garden. They are simple flowers, daisies and dahlias, not the expensive roses Jason sent to manipulate me, but flowers smelling of respect and affection, asking for nothing more than an afternoon of talk in the sunroom. A week ago, I gave a talk at the community center. There were more than 100 people, many my age, with slumped shoulders and fear in their eyes, waiting for someone to tell them they still have a voice. I stood up, in my nicest tunic and back straight, and told them the truth, that their children do not own them, that their life's effort is not a bargaining chip for others' vanity, and that never, never is it too late to defend what is yours. When I finished, the applause lasted minutes. I felt every clap was a piece of my own armor finishing adjusting, a recognition that Miss Susan is no longer anyone's shadow, but the sun of her own system. Sometimes, when night falls and the mountain chill comes down the chimney, I look at Thomas's photo and thank him for leaving me this stone fort. I know Jason and Tiffany are bankrupt. I know they are suffering the consequences of living beyond their means. But it is no longer my battle. I already fulfilled raising a boy. It is not my duty to rescue a man who decided to bite the hand that fed him. My mansion is lit. The fountain water sings. And I, for the first time in 37 years, sleep with my bedroom door open, knowing the only owner of my dreams and my keys is myself. I have won peace, and peace, Jason, has no price on any credit card in the world. My hands are still now. I sit in the courtyard, listening to the fountain sing its eternal song of patience, and I think about the stories we tell ourselves to survive. Perhaps this is all a fictional story to someone else, a tale spun to remind the world that dignity doesn't expire with age. But for me, the silence of this empty house is the truest thing I have ever known. We must draw lines in the sand, even if the tide that threatens to wash them away is our own blood, because love without boundaries is just self-destruction wrapped in a hug. I chose my dignity over my son, and though the price was heartbreak, the receipt reads freedom. And freedom, my dear, is the only currency that matters when the sun sets on Jones Street.